Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SCMH webinar on First Article Inspection. I'm Susan Parsons with the IAQG, and I'll be supporting Carl Zimmerman, the 9102 International Document Representative and Sponsor from Spirit Aerosystems, and Peter Papadopoulos, a 9102 Writing Team member from RTX. They will be sharing their knowledge of the IAQG 9102 standard and the SCMH guidance you will find in section 3.2. They'll also be answering any of your questions as soon as they get through the first few slides. But before we start, just a couple recommendations. We recommend to close other applications to improve your bandwidth. We would encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You can note them in the Q&A section, or if that's not an option for you, then you can add them to the chat section. Time permitting, of course, we will answer as many questions as possible. Just a reminder, this webinar is also being recorded and will be posted in the SCMH and shared publicly. Today's webinar content, if you could go back one. Today's webinar content, we're going to do a quick intro of the SCMH, just for those that are joining us that may not have been added to the SCMH users list yet. Then we're going to go over the IAQG 91 standard and how it works together with the SCMH 3.2 first article inspection guidance. We'll cover the core and the tools in the SCMH section. We'll also discuss some prevalent topics. Then we'll go into our live Q&A session where you can, again, add your questions as we go along or as they come up towards the end while others are asking questions. And then depending on how much time we have, we can do a little bit more about the SCMH and where you can find the other guidance in the SCMH. So our learning objectives today, we would like everybody to be more familiar with the SCMH and its content, but more specifically today for the focus topic, the FAI 9102 guidance and the examples, which Carl will be opening live throughout the presentation as they come up. So for a quick intro, if you haven't been there yet, IAQG.org, that's the International Aerospace Quality Group. So simply IAQG.org. When you get to this homepage, you can learn more about the Supply Chain Management Handbook as it flashes through the different tools. You can also go to the top and click on SCMH or IAQG tools, and the drop down will show you the SCMH. This guidance is free to anybody who would like to download it and use it in their supply chain. This is sort of an eye test, but the idea here is to show you that the SCMH structure is around the supply chain process life cycle. And in the Make section, which you can click on live, it'll open up to all of the various topics that we offer under Make. Remember, this is not topics that pop up in any order. It's as they are a priority to the industry. We add them in the order that they came to us as a priority, and we add the guidance under it. So you would click on Make. It would open up a listing, and in that you will find 3.2 first article inspection. There is an area where you'll find webinars. There's the core guidance, which is the main document. And then in the toolbox, we have the different examples that we'll be sharing with you today. There's also a contact SCMH blue button to the mid section on the right there. If you have any questions, the questions will come to me directly, Susan Parsons, and then I will forward them to Carl for response if it's for FAI, but if it's questions regarding another guidance topic or something of interest to you, I'll answer them directly or find the person that will. Okay, Carl, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Carl Zimmerman. I am the IDS for the 9102 standard, and Peter Papadopoulos with RTX is also joining on the panel for the FAI webinar.
Yeah, this is Peter Papadopoulos. I'll be helping out today. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A section. I know some people don't have the Q&A pop up sometimes in Teams, so you can use chat. It's just easier if we keep them all there. I'll try to curate the questions at the end just to keep the flow going. So the live Q&A will be at the end of these topics, but please post any questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
The IAQG 9102 standard, to start with, it relies on the principles of a functioning QMS. It is a standalone document, but takes into account that there should be a functioning QMS while performing the first article. And the intent is to have ongoing product quality. Even though you're just performing the first article on the first part to prove the process can be compliant in producing good parts, the intent is that you use that process going forward and you produce ongoing quality product. The IAQG standard is the minimum requirements. You can add additional information to the first articles if your organization wishes. There's also customers that may flow down additional requirements through PO notes. Some examples of those additional requirements that are prevalent throughout the industry are the extraction of design characteristics from the specifications, not just the drawing or parts list, and additional objective evidence that they require to be part of the FAIR package other than the forms 1, 2, and 3 and the balloon drawings. The SCMH 3.2.1, the Aerospace 9102 First Article Inspection Requirements Guidance. This is one of the core items in the SCMH to help users interpret and see best practices and pitfalls from the document. This document was prepared by and is under control of the IAQG 9102 standards writing team. It provides guidance to help organizations understand the requirements of 9102. This guidance does not contain any additional requirements, but instead offers explanations and examples on how to accomplish FAI meeting the requirements within the 9102 standard, both the body of the standard and the forms. The genus of the material encompasses previous FAQs and explanation of new requirements that will be updated as new questions arise. This SCMH, if you go to SCMH as Sue described and hit the make once you are logged in, first article is section 3.2. Here's the previous webinar. This webinar will also be uploaded here. Here's the core guidance material, and under the toolbox are examples. For the core guidance material, it is all the topics that the writing team has received questions on. This is the table of contents. Not every section of the standard is covered, only the ones that we felt needed extra guidance. There's also best practices within this, not actual requirements, but best practices through the industry to help people develop their first article process further. It goes through, and the sections are numbered as the sections are in the standard. So if you have a question or need further guidance on a specific section or definition, you can go straight to that guidance in this guidance material and see if we've added anything else before you need to send in a a question, we have added clarification where we can, some of the common mistakes that people make that we're seeing throughout the industry, and then best practices that help avoid those mistakes throughout this document. As more questions come in, if we receive several questions on one particular area or see that more guidance is needed, then we will update this document and add more guidance as it's needed throughout the time until the standard's revised again. Example fairs. The 9102 writing team has completed example fair packages to demonstrate one of many ways to achieve compliance to these requirements within the standard. We have examples of multiple characteristics are one of the things that can be completed by grouping the characteristics, or they can be done one at a time. Both methods are compliant to the standard, so just because it's on the example first article doesn't mean that it has to be completed that way. It's just showing one way of compliantly completing first article. It shows the current examples. In there are details including COTS, company standards, detail parts and assembly, has a balloon document, and includes the FAIR package. More examples will be added in the future. This is also under the SCMH section under the toolbox. We have the FAIR or FAI scenario examples. So we took a detail or a full assembly package and added the first article. So this would be like the engineering and the definition of the parts that you would see through the top level assembly. And then we've attached parts list notes, other information that you would need to complete the first article that you would have if you were processing it, including the drawing down to the details, and then the items as part of the detail, the COTS items and company standards. We've defined all of them in this document, and then we've also created a first article to correspond with the different parts. This is the first article for the tie rod detail part, and we have gone through and filled out all the first article requirements in Form 1, 2, and the characteristics on Form 3. We've also attached the balloon document that's required in the first article package, including the parts list. And those can be found also in the SCMH. So as we go through and we are updating the guidance material and answering questions that come in, there are some prevalent questions or topics that people have inquired about. And so we've picked a few of those to address in today's webinar. One of the first ones is the change that was made from revision B to C of the standard. Part type was added to Form 1. The part type was changed from the serial number field that was in field 17 Form 1, and it was changed to part type. The reason it was changed to part type is to enter the part, whether it's a detail, a subassembly, software, catalog items, or COTS items. This is used to help identify the type of part and if the FAI identifier would be required in the next field. There's a lot of confusion on when a part FAI number was needed in field 18. And so if an FAI wasn't expected, the reason that the part type was added was so that it was easier to tell if the part was a COTS part. You wouldn't need a first article for it. Also, noted is COTS become detail parts once it's modified. So if you have a COTS part that has a modification to it, during that modification, you would perform a first article on whatever was changed, starting with the COTS being the material of the part, documenting the processing or changes that were made to it. Then that part is issued as a new part number, which is now a detail part, and the first article for that COTS modification would be listed on Form 1. Another of the topics that has come up is during this new revision, we added a definition and an allowance of a detailed C of C for special processing. This provision was allowed in place of a FAIR. The requirement is to flow down any information to your sub-tiers that the first article needed to be completed for any of the characteristics that they performed. Special processing, that was a gap within the industry. Most customers were not getting back a first article from their special process suppliers. Through discussions, the main reason that this was needed was to ensure that the processing was being done correctly, and they've caught the drawing requirements and accounted for those characteristics during the processing. To help alleviate that is to meet what the industry was doing and still document the characteristics. We created a definition of a detailed C of C that will have all the design characteristics, e.g. from the drawing or DPD requirements produced by the organization, including the tolerances, as well as the results of those characteristics in the C of C. The definition of design characteristics does not include the specifications. This was also a change that was made from B to C. The definition of design characteristics was revised and specifications was removed from that definition. The requirements embedded within the specifications are not required to be listed on Form 3 or on the detailed C of C. To help with the definition of what is expected on a detailed C of C, we have created this example, which will be uploaded to the guidance material under the toolbox of the SCMH. We took the tie rod detail example first article that we had, and we pulled the information from Form 2 of that document and created an example C of C from the conversion, coding, and paint special process that was done. This example C of C lists the conversion coding spec and accept. The painting of 2 coats would need to be documented with the results. The drawing or parts list notes calls out the actual paint thickness. This would be a characteristic that would need to be also recorded on a detailed C of C to be compliant instead of a first article being done by the supplier. And then part mark, even though it's not a special process or listed on Form 2, it is still a process that was performed by the supplier, and it would be listed on the requirements of accounting for the characteristics and the results on the detailed C of C. one of the next changes that's become a prevalent topic is the elimination of single production run exemption. So single production runs, including spares, are now applicable to the 9102 standard. All part runs that are not development, prototype parts, procured standard catalog items, COTS, or deliverable software require an FAI to be done when they are run through the line. The previous revision, the reason that this change was made from one revision to the current revision was there was a misinterpretation for performing FAIs on spares. Out of production spares was listed as an example of a unique single production run, something that you would only run once and not run again. People interpret that to mean all spares, so suppliers were not performing first articles on the spares that they were producing on a regular basis. One of the next reasons was it seemed to become an audit trap. People would say that it was a unique single run. They were only going to run it once. They'd never run these parts again. And then a few months later, they would get another order, something else would change, they would run a second order of parts. Even performing the first article at that time, they still missed the first production run that they should have performed the first article the first time when they got a new run of parts or plans changed. We're seeing several audit non-conformances because of this problem. The last reason was it seemed to be a loophole through the industry. People would define a unique single run event for very small changes that they weren't going to run it again. There were instances where suppliers would run one whole order of parts for a 3-year contract and put them in stock so that they didn't have to provide a first article because they said it was only one run. They would also split orders, so it was one continuous run, but they ran them at different times so that they could say that it was only one run and not produce a first article to their customers, and use the 9102 language to be compliant to that. One of the other topics that comes up is the extraction of requirements. For DPD requirements, it's required to extract both the implicit and explicit design characteristics. Most suppliers or organizations pick up on the explicit characteristics that are your GD&T defined boxes on the actual model. It's the implicit characteristics that we see that people don't necessarily understand. The thicknesses, the profile of a surface that's defined in a note affecting all other surfaces. That's the types of items on DPD that seem to be missed throughout the extraction of characteristics. Specifications was removed from the definition of design characteristics as stated earlier. So it's just the characteristics defined within the drawing parts list, the actual engineering, excluding the requirements within a specification. Customer requirements, PO requirements. This is something that's also missed throughout the industry. The customer may flow down something, for example, smaller holes to be put in the part. Instead of full-size holes, they only want pilot holes added to the part. If the supplier doesn't review the PO notes all the way through, then they miss that and they put full-size holes in the parts instead. Drawing notes from the drawing that override the specifications. That's something that we're seeing missed in the industry also. They perform to the specification and are used to doing that, but if there's a special drawing note or flag note that overrides that specification, that can be missed and not accounted for in the parts. And then the other error that we're seeing more prevalent is they're not extracting all the design characteristics from a note. A note can have more than one design characteristic listed in it, and each one of those design characteristics would need to be accounted for as their own characteristic on Form 3 of the first article. And we are to the live Q&A section. So Peter has been going through questions that would have come in, and he probably has some to ask.
I do have many to ask that have been coming in. For those of you who are on chat, I've been pasting them over to the Q&A as well. I've answered a few of them, but the first one that I'll ask Carl today, which I think is an easy one, hopefully you know the answer to, is there was a question about the EN 9102 standard, or when that will be released. I'm not sure personally, but it says it's currently in project. Is that correct? And when will it be released?
Yes, the 9102 standard was released in PREAN shortly after it was released in the US. It has to stay in that state for, it takes about a year to run through that process. So this summer, late summer, it should release into the EN of 9102, the EN certification body.
All right, that was an easy one. Thank you very much, Carl. I posted it as well. Another question, and I guess this one is I'll go in order. It's kind of a recommendation more than it is to the standard. And I know that you deal with this type of issue, but it says, what are your recommendations on how to balloon drawings when you're doing the FAI for whole aircraft? So any hits or tips or tricks that you have for that, or what would you say to this user?
The first article would be broke up into the parts that make up the aircraft. Some of each of the details, subassemblies or assemblies that go into it would have their own first article. So it's easier to manage that way. If it's on a drawing, then you can balloon it with that. There are tools that are created that help with the ballooning. There are several companies that have different tools available. There's also, if the engineering is model based, there are tools that help with that, or people take screenshots of the model for each of the characteristics and then have screenshots that are ballooned for each component that they make and assemble into the aircraft.
Great suggestion. Thank you, Carl. All right, so here's an interesting one. If design engineering assigned a key characteristic to a basic dimension, do suppliers balloon the basic dimension, measure and report it on Form 3?
Basic dimensions are not required to be added to the first article because they're considered reference characteristics and they may be omitted. So it's not a requirement. It would be a best practice to add that if the customer put it as a key characteristic. Well, then there is importance to it, and even though it wouldn't be a requirement the way the standard's worded, that should be probably accounted for on the first article. And it would have to be tracked through other parts of your quality management system as a key characteristic and recorded for tracking.
Yeah, based on customer requirements. Great. That makes sense to me. Thanks, Carl. All right, now here's an interesting question. I know that we haven't delved into CFC, but there's a question. Would you need batch numbers and expiry dates on the CFC? Is that a requirement? What would you recommend?
That's really outside the scope of the 9102 document on it, what the CFC has to contain. There's another IAQG standard that covers CFCs, and you would have to see what your customer requirements are for documenting items on CFC and refer to the other IAQG standard on how a CFC should be made and what requirements are within that standard.
Definitely agree with that. All right, here's another interesting one. We have a question on FAIs and I guess when we're doing them. The question asks when an FAI is required by customer for first delivery of an item, which obviously the standard does say that, but before qualification of a product has actually been completed, whether it's FCA or PCA. So how do you orientate the FAI? In other words, what does an FAI mean when the product hasn't been qualified yet?
The FAI is to define the characteristics and make sure all the characteristics of the product are understood and captured and documented. A qualification is more of all the aspects of either the part or the process. A lot of times I've seen the FAI used in support of the qualifications. It's not necessarily required to have the FAI for the qualifications, but in several cases I've seen them used as evidence, and they help the qualification of the part proceed.
Good, agree with that. So yeah, it's always a tricky situation when they're going straight from development to production. So, but they can always use 9102 for that. All right. I'm switching over just to give everyone a chance to the chat. I didn't get a chance to record everything over there, but all right. I think this is a common one. Is there a good way to reflect characteristics in a fair when they are expressed through a 3D model? So I guess generally, when you have a 3D model, what's the best way of representing that on a fair?
Well, first of all the characteristics need to be extracted and recorded on Form 3. Like stated before, the explicit characteristics are easily picked up on. It's the implicit ones, which would be the items such as the thicknesses are sometimes not explicitly defined. You have to use measurement tools and analyze those on the FAI for Form 3. The other one that's missed is parts list notes that are on there that would affect all other features that aren't explicitly defined. After all those are extracted on Form 3, the other question would be the ballooning of the model. There are tools that are available from different companies that help you balloon the model and leave it in either the model form, 3D PDF is what some companies use, or they balloon the model and it takes screenshots of the actual ballooning and exports it that way, or some companies just take screenshots of the model and attach those as the ballooned document for those FAIs.
Awesome, thank you. That is correct. It's one of those things you got to extract them and you got to put them in. Thanks, Carl. Trying to go through, see what's a common one here. Well, here's one, and I know I answered it. Hopefully, you agree with this. A lot of customers demand fares for products which they have been using in the field for more than 10 years, even though the product has no issues and it has not undergone any changes. There's no lapse in production. They need it, however, without any specific reason. Fares in such situations does not add value. I won't get into that. Is there any guidelines in the standard regarding this? I guess the simple question is there anything in the standard regarding this?
There's not in the standard if no change has occurred, but if your customer's flowing down that requirement, then you'll have to meet customer requirements that are flowed down contractually or through PO agreements.
Yeah. And I wrote that, but I forgot to post it. So thanks for. Yeah, I agree with you. No, that's a tough one. So yes, the fare can be used more than what's listed in 9102, unfortunately, or fortunately for the customer. Oh, here's an interesting one, and I wish we had some other software experts here today on our team, but let's see if we can muddle through this. How do I use FAI forms to address initial software or firmware requirements for product assemblies and parts, but software is not detailed at all?
Can you say that one again?
Yeah, so how are we recording software firmware requirements in a FAIR that's part of hardware?
So there has been this last revision, we did add some areas to record the software that's included in the build of the hardware, even though the software itself doesn't require a first article. The revision level and software that's entered in there, there's different instances. A lot of times it would be recorded on Form 1 as a component going into the assembly or build. Sometimes it is part of the functional test and would be recorded on Form 2 as part of the functional test criteria. But we did add language throughout the 9102 standard to account for all the instances we could think of in the writing team that where the documentation of the software revision would need to be recorded or where it would come up.
That's great. Appreciate that. I agree. It's definitely we've added more information there, but it's one of those ones that has been I would say evolving nature. I got this one from the chat. I think it's one that we've talked about, but someone's asking if their understanding is correct, but it says if a special process subtier provides a CFC which captures the relevant design characteristics and its results, that special process subtier does not need to perform their FAIR.
Correct. They can perform the detailed CFC that captures all the design characteristics that they create in lieu of performing a FAIR for those characteristics.
That's exactly what the standard tried to do. So I appreciate the question. And I think Arvin, that is correct. Oh, here's a nice one. I think we can answer this pretty quick. Is a ballooned drawing a requirement or just a recommended practice?
The current revision of the standard made it a requirement. It is part of the FAIR package. The definition of a FAIR consists of Form 1, 2, and 3 and the balloon document. The previous revision did not mention anything about balloon drawings or documents and didn't have it as a requirement, but that was added as a requirement in the current revision.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Carl. Let me go back over to the Q&A. Sorry, I'm trying to manage the two forms of communication. I had one queued up, but it's taking me a second to switch over. Here is a good one since a new one from anonymous user. It says, as a good practice, is an FAI plan required to be completed before the part is produced? Or the supplier can have the FAI completed at the end of production?
There is a requirement for a first article plan before the production is started. That's in the planning section of the 9102 document that describes what should be done in advance of the product being made and what needs to be identified so that you ensure that you're capturing all the characteristics as the part is being produced, what is needed to capture them, and that nothing would be covered up by the time you got to the end of the product manufacturer. You may not have all the characteristics accessible anymore to record on the first article.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Here's a question I think that we get every now and then. So when it comes to the first article and you have details, COT, and subcomponents, how is the acceptance of the location and orientation of the details in assemblies captured in the FAIR?
Those would be their own design characteristics that would be captured on Form 3. If it's within a model, then that could be part of the implicit characteristics that would have to be extracted from the model. If it's defined on the drawing, then there would be a definition, a symbol that would need to be accounted for on Form 3 that would show the orientation or side that components were installed on of the other components.
Awesome, thank you. Do we need to submit a CFC for all materials on Form 2?
The CFC number or traceability number is required to be documented in field 10 of Form 2. As far as submitting the CFC, that is not a requirement of a FAIR, of a minimal FAIR package as defined by the standard. Several customers do flow down additional requirements on what CFCs they want to be part of the FAIR package or additional objective evidence. So while it's not a requirement of the 9102 standard to provide the CFCs as attachments supporting the FAIR, it is a requirement of several customers. So you would have to check your customer requirements to ensure that there's no additional requirements, and how that's defined is what needs to be attached in your FAIR package.
Here's a good question. I know we've answered this many times. I didn't get a chance to write it down, but if you have a detailed part that needs a new FAIR or a Delta FAIR, do you have to perform an FAI at the upper level, the actual assembly?
Each first article is a standalone. It's only done on the characteristics that are affected. So if you have a detail part that's changed and you update that first article through a partial or a full, it assembles into the assembly. The assembly first article would only need to be completed if any of the changes to the detail affect the assembly installation. If it is a change that doesn't affect it, maybe a finish change wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with the assembly characteristics of the detail part. But if you changed a whole location on the detail, that would change that location in the assembly, and those characteristics would also need to be accounted for on the assembly FAI. So it would only be completed if the changes to the detail part characteristics affect characteristics on the assembly. Then those characteristics would also need to be accounted for in a partial or full first article.
Peter, would you like me to take a few minutes to go through some of the SCMH guidance slides and then give you a chance to pull some together?
Yeah, that'll be good.
All right, so folks don't leave. Let them get a few seconds here to pull some of your questions together, and we'll continue on as long as we can, as long as time permits. I have sharing right now just a few slides in case you want to learn more about the SCMH. I saw some questions come up regarding how to find out more about it. So here we have on the IAQG page, like I showed you at the beginning, you can click up at the top and get to the SCMH. And once you're in the SCMH, there's something called the About SCMH. Here you can use the search feature. You can click FAI, and everything to do or connected with FAI will pop up in a list, and you can download any of those items. You can also see a communication pack. I saw a question or two about how can I communicate some of this guidance to my suppliers. Well, first, I wanted to let you know that we have recently launched a public YouTube channel. You would have to search YouTube IAQG and then type in FAI, and you'll see the last webinar. It was the first webinar we put out on the public channel, and we're about to add this one to it once reviewed. So not only will it be in the SCMH and the presentation materials itself will be in the SCMH, we'll also have it out on the YouTube channel. The communication pack talks about the SCMH and the fact that there's free guidance in it. It's got an alphabetical listing. There's a couple languages available now in Chinese, Japanese. We're popping up Italian. So to help with the supply chain, a lot of our member companies have put supplier-facing messages on their supplier portal, letting them know that this free guidance exists to support them in meeting the IAQG standards requirements, like 9100 requirements. Okay, some of the content as of today, we have all of these topics. Again, at the beginning, I will let you know that doesn't cover everything. It covers the hot topics in the industry as they come in as a priority to the IAQG to get further guidance out there, whether it be written by the standard writing teams, like in this case with the 9102, or getting a member company experts together to create different guidance. So you see that here. This is also in the About page in the SCMH. And then some of the projects we're working on now, all the way from special characteristics, definitions, customer delegation, all of things which I'm sure this group would appreciate sharing a little more information on. So we have quite a few, and some of the new topics like cybersecurity, common language for generic requirements will be coming out soon. Okay. For this webinar, like I showed you before, they are available within the section. So in this example, it's showing APQP, And at the top of it, above the core and the toolbox, you'll see the different available APQP webinars. For FAI, we'll have the 2 up there, and we'll probably add a little connection link to the title so you'll understand. In this case, one's about prevalent topics, the other's about the changes from B to C, which I pointed out. Okay, if you have any questions about the SCMH regarding FAI or any other guidance material in it, all of the pages have a little blue box that say contact SCMH. That comes directly to me. I'm either able to answer your questions or help you, assist you find something, or I will forward it to the appropriate international document representative, in this case, Carl, for 9102. So feel free to use that. In addition, you'll see the alphabetical topics list. I pointed out the About page. That has all the topics available and links right to it. There's other things too, which we're sharing mapping now, and we're improving those mappings with the 9100 requirements and linking them over to the available SCMH guidance and other standards. In the SCMH at the bottom, there's an item called Take Our Survey. This is really helpful for us to understand how far-reaching our guidance has gotten around the world, but more importantly, it gives you an opportunity to put some of your suggestions for those priorities I was talking about, topics that are very interesting, key to you. The more we see them, the higher the numbers of a particular topic. That's how it gets onto our list. As you saw, that we currently have about 12 in work. And that's about where we keep our listing. So as one is completed and added to the SCMH, we can add more. So I'm going to go back now to see if Peter has a minute to, you have a few more minutes that you want to close it out by asking some more questions.
There was one question. It covers a few, and it talks about specifications and ballooning specifications. They're providing information within. And I would say the general question is that do you need to include information that is in specifications, and is it a best practice to include it? Because one of them did comment that says per the specification they're not required.
Yes, as we redefine the definition of design characteristics in the current revision, specifications was removed from the definition of a design characteristic. The requirements embedded within the specification are not required to be listed on Form 3 by the standard by 9102. Some customers flow down that those requirements are to be listed. It would be a best practice to list those. One customer in particular has a matrix that they have defined all the characteristics within their standards, and they have the suppliers fill out that matrix of how they account for each of the requirements within the specification and attach that to the first article. There are other methods of best practices to account for all the characteristics to ensure that no requirements were missed in the specifications, as well as the actual drawing or parts list or other engineering defined features. But we removed it from a requirement from the 9102 standard because we felt that it should be covered by different aspects of your quality management system to ensure that you're meeting all the processing requirements rather than repeat them for every part that is produced. There should be another way to document compliance for each of those characteristics within the process that would be more suited and less time consuming, more applicable to the processes and specifications as they are called out.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. That is one of the questions we get a lot of, so appreciate your feedback. Here's a very specific one, but this probably happens a lot as well. Are there scenarios where the customer PO must be included in the supporting documentation? Is it good practice to always include a copy of the customer PO?
If the customer PO has additional requirements in it, such that as a condition of supply for the part, an example given earlier was that the customer requires that only pilot holes are added um, to the part instead of full-size holes as described within the engineering, or a finish is omitted in a certain area, or part of the engineering, it isn't a complete representation of the engineering. Those characteristics would need to be ballooned, documented on Form 3 of the first article, and where those are, the requirements are coming from. If they're coming from the PO, the only place that they would be for the requirements and to document them would be in the parts list, and so that would be added as a balloon drawing.
That's great. That is correct. And I know that it happens a lot that there are requirements on the PO. So I'm not sure if it's a best practice to always include it, but at a minimum, when there are requirements that need to be captured. Carl. Let's see. I'll go to one last one, which I was about to answer. Going back to the, are manufacturing documents, routing cards, travelers required to be included? The requirements say that this information has to be reviewed, but does that mean it included as part of the fair?
For the definition of a fair, the minimum requirements are the Form 1, 2, and 3 and the balloon documentation. Those have to be included in every fair. In addition to that would be documents that are either defined by the customer and flowed down that they will be required in the fair, or documents that an organization determines should be part of the objective evidence and also added to the fair. But the minimum requirements defined within 9102 are just Forms 1, 2, 3, and the ballooned documents that support the characteristics on Form 3.
All right. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for answering all
I'm
the
going to thank you. And I wanted to thank Peter and Carl for today's webinar. I want to thank all the attendees for showing today and showing their interest in FAI. We look forward to your questions in future free FAI and other SCMH webinars. Would you like to make any closing remarks, Carl or Peter?
Just a quick one. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the questions and bringing them forward. Thanks, Carl, for all those great answers.
And I'd like to thank Sue and Peter for joining and putting on this webinar. We answer questions as they come in through SCMH or other sources, and those questions help us with producing more guidance material and adding to the SCMH. So as those questions come in, we'll answer them, but we also, if there's topics that keep coming up, then we'll try to add more information so that everyone has the opportunity to go through it.
Thank you again. Have a great day. Bye.